Hello, and welcome to another Lombardi Live. I have a very exciting show today with a great friend. We haven't touched down for a while, so it's going to be fun for me to reconnect to and for you to find out about him, what he's doing now, what he had done before. Any one artist he played with, a drummer could look back and say, hey, I've had a really great career. When you actually look at all the artists he's played with, to name just a few, Stevie Wonder, Snoop, Dr. Dre, quite a diverse group right there. We're going to get into how you prepare for doing something like that. On top of being a writer and producer, a talented man in every direction. Thank you so much, Trevor Lawrence Jr., for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Don.
Yeah.
Good to see you again, man. Good to be here. Always home, so it's great.
And obviously, Trevor Lawrence Jr. would lead one to believe there's a Trevor Lawrence Sr. Tell me a little bit about the history of your family, which is instilled in music. There was a DNA going on there, I think.
Right. So, on the one side, it starts with my grandfather, who actually won a Grammy the year I was born with his gospel group. And he had a song with Paul Simon called Love Me Like a Rock. He was in a group called the Dixie Hummingbirds. So that's my grandfather, my mother's father. So my mother was a singer, and she was a 70s Supreme. And then she was in Stevie Wonder's original Wonder Love band, so all the songs of Key of Life and all that. And that's where she met my dad, who was a sax player, so he played on all the songs of Key of Life records, Sir Duke and all those things. And then he ended up being a very successful writer and producer in the 80s. He produced I'm So Excited and all these other records. And, it translated to me.
Your dad not only was a sax player, a legendary sax player, by the way.
Like Marvin Gaye Trouble Man, and just quite a few things, over the years. And so, for me, the story is my mom said she wanted to be a drummer, but she became a singer, so I became the drummer. That's the story. So, it's pretty amazing, and my kids are the same way. My daughter, is 13 years old, and there's a show that came out earlier this year called Bel Air. Every recap was my daughter's music that she made when she was 12, actually. So, she has several pieces of music in the show. So, it's great to see the generations contribute. Keep going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Growing up, I can imagine you had a lot of opportunities because your family was involved in music and they were around so many great musicians. But the drummer side of your career, learning how to play drums, getting prepared for taking advantage of all these opportunities when they came along, because they probably came along quicker for you than they would for most because people knew you. I first heard about you from our mutual friend Jim Kellner. He said, hey, got to check out this young kid. He can play, he can produce, he's really doing everything.
Well, Jim, that's like family. Jim used to do this to me. So
yeah, I said, how long have you known Trevor? He said, well, when he was born, I used to rock him.
Yeah, so that's like that's like an unofficial uncle. I love Jim to death, and it's interesting because those opportunities, it's weird because no one was a drummer. So it was like I was around things, but I still had to kind of make my way in certain ways. The familiarity was there. And then we also had a studio all through the 90s. That was pretty popular in North Hollywood. So a lot of people came through there. So on the producer side, like that's how I got some of my first placements. My first gold record was with the Temptations, and that was all a result of them being around the studio. So in that way, it was really amazing because I did have people that knew my dad and my mom. So, you those generations of, we knew you since you were a kid, that used to happen a lot. And then Stevie called me one time, but it was more so from the regular just talk of LA, but then it was like, oh, well, that's my godson, even though we weren't close, like we didn't talk, but it was like a connection, but so I still had to go over there, and it was just me and him at his studio, Wonderland. And the first thing he wants to do is play giant steps as fast as possible. And this is the thing that I'll never forget about that day. He still had a rose with a tag on it. That's the thing that tripped me out the most of that day. It was like a perfectly brand new rose that was from the old days. And
he bought it especially for that.
Yeah, and he's like, he wanted to go. I was like, you want to do this? Like, okay, let's go. But that was his thing. He didn't want to play his songs. He didn't want to say, let's play Sir Duke. None of that. He wanted to swing on the fast burnout giant steps. So, that was fun. And then, it led to some bucket list moments, with him. We did Live 8 for 1,000,000 people in Philadelphia. That was a beautiful moment. And, it kind of, once you get to a gig like that, it helps your name familiarity, happen. And, it's just a trickle, as long as you do everybody right and, take care of your business, it should help your career kind of move forward. And so as a drummer, from that point, it really helped a lot, even though my emphasis has always been recording. But that on the live side, that really helped. You know what I mean? For sure. So.
And again, looking at your technique, developing your technique.
Yeah.
Was it through private instruction or
Yeah.
through school? You got scholarships at a very early age?
I did, but it was really I started taking the lessons early from a gentleman by the name of Ralph Penland, who was a real fixture in L.A. on the jazz scene, And I always go to his gigs and stuff, and at the old Catalinas and stuff, and sit right there. That's how I met Tony Williams for the first time at the old Catalinas, and I started learning how to read with Ralph when I was young, and just things that a real working drummer will tell you that are important that I still today, like being on time and watching your dynamics and all these things, not just the technical side, and I think that really helped a lot. And then, of course, school. I went to the famous now Hamilton High School where Abe Laborio went, and so many people, Mike Elizondo, Warren Campbell, all these great musicians and producers. So we were all. Abe was the year before me, so I didn't get to go to school with him, but it was the same. I replaced him in the big band, so it was the same when he graduated. So it was the same kind of pool. You know what I mean? So we had that experience, and that experience was important too because our high school principal went on to be the CEO of Hard Rock. So he ran the school like a business. It was different. We had corporate, it was corporate sponsors putting us in real situations with gigs, making us go do gigs for the school board. Like we learned a lot in that school. So that helped, you know what I mean? And then I was recording real early, like 15, 16, I started really making records and recording.
People hiring, not as a producer, but as a
drummer still. This still as a drummer. And, I'll never forget, also because of old relationships with my father, but also because our studio at the time that I was telling you about was next door to a place that used to be called Drum Paradise, where a lot of people kept their drums.
Sure.
So those things together, Harvey used to let me use his Gretsch before I had drums, like before I was with DW, before I had real good drums.
Speaking of Harvey Mason.
Right, Harvey Mason, he used to let me use his Gretsch. And I just looked at that like, not cymbals or snares, but the drums.
Okay,
you know what I'm saying?
Because those were his,
you don't want to give the whole sound away, but that concept, I'm telling you, Don, that imprinted on me in a whole nother kind of way because it was just such an honor, but then it was just like, wow, this is somebody that's like, hey, man, this is going to help you get your thing. And then you're learning, okay, this is what stuff should be like. This is what stuff should sound like. And that was huge for me at that time. You know what I mean? So, all those things together kind of helped me learn my studio sensibility and then how to act on the road and how to do the live thing as well. Because they're two completely different mindsets and different worlds. You know what I'm saying? In my opinion.
Yeah, explain those two different worlds a little bit too. And then I've got to ask you also, because you speak in traditional grip when you're talking.
Right, and I don't play all the time in traditional.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you that too.
Well,
that's fine
I'm
too.
a jazz guy first.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
Before everything else, I'm swinging.
Talking to young drummers out there who, probably most of them have the experience playing live or even playing with their friends and cover bands.
Yeah.
But the difference you would look at as a drummer in the way you would approach playing in the studio or what they should prepare themselves for to be able to understand both.
As far as, things that help you in the live situation versus the studio situation, certain things are the same. No ego, do your homework, be on time. And like I was saying, the ego, without sometimes you knowing it, can stop you from believing that you need to even do homework for a gig. So you come ill prepared because you're like, they called me, I'm just going to do my thing. I got it. That's just not the way it should be. Like when someone's calling you to do any job, I'm asking all these questions so I can get an idea. If it's the studio, I'm asking questions to figure out what drums I'm going to have them bring, what style of music it is. If it's live, I'm asking questions about what size venues is it, what is it, ears versus monitors, all these things that have an impact on what I'm going to bring and how I'm going to be prepared for the gig. Because at the time of the gig, if it's not right and you say, oh, I don't have this, that's the wrong time. You had all this time before. We had rehearsals. Why didn't you take care of it before, right? And you can't leave it up always to the production, people from the shows or whatever. You got to do it yourself. So I like to just be as prepared as possible. So when I first started doing records on the recording side, I noticed that, like Kenny Aronoff and JR and Harvey, they had so many snare drums. And I was like, my God, what is all this for? And then as I started getting older and talking to producers and realizing, oh, it's not one snare drum fits all. You're changing the character for these different musical situations. So I began that quest, you know what I mean, of just, okay, let me start collecting snares, and then it goes into collecting drums, and it just becomes a thing of with the studio stuff, you're a drummer and you're also kind of a producer, because you're kind of producing your own drum track, because you're basically saying, I feel like this sound is going to work for that. Now, certain producers are very specific. Certain producers even have kits that they want you to use. And I'll tell you a funny story. There was a producer, I won't say his name, who had a real big run in the 90s, and he was camped out at a studio called Ocean Way. And I'll never forget, man, he called me for this session, and my stuff comes, and then I get to the session, and my stuff's in the hallway, not out of the cases. I'm like, okay, he probably has drums. He had this kit that was concocted and set up in the most non-ergonomic way at all. It was like the side, I had to, and he was like, oh, you can't move anything. He was an eccentric guy. The microphones, you can't move anything. So I'm literally doing this drum, trying to play with these drums like the most uncomfortable thing in the world. But, when I did the track, he comes running out. He was like, man, your hi-hat hand. And I said, man, hold on. I'm now to myself, I'm like, okay, this dude's over the top. He's like telling the engineer, man, that hi-hat, did you see that hi-hat hand? I was like, okay, this guy's over the top. But, you're being hired for a thing, so I can't impose my thing. This is your vibe. This is what you feel is right for the music. I got to go with it, right? So that comes with that no ego and that humility thing. Sometimes you know better. And it's still not your place to say, hey, man, you should do this. It's like, because I'm a producer too. So sometimes I'm seeing problems and incorrect mic stuff and all. I can't just be that guy sometimes. You know what I'm saying? And you have to just go with the flow. So those are lessons you learn. Sometimes when you can see somebody that's not as experienced, that from how they interact with everybody. You know what I'm saying? And you over the time, you learn how to just read the situation and read the room and make the right decisions. You know what I'm saying? So that works on both sides too, live or in the studio, but really in the studio world. Now, when live comes, there's other things to factor, like stamina, you know what I'm saying? Like time differences, how that's going to affect you. If you're flying to Japan, which is 17 hours ahead, and then you get there and it's like nighttime, you're going to go drink sake all night, and then you wake up in the middle of the night because your time's off, and then you got a 9 o'clock sound check, you're gonna be fried. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you're not doing tours and shows to party. That's after the gig is the most important thing. And you have so much time in a road situation to yourself, you can really self-sabotage if you're not smart. You know what I mean? So I learned about that too. Like when I'm going to do a show, everything show related is handled first. Then if there's time left, maybe I'll go have a bite or whatever. But I'm there strictly for the show. If I got to go there and try to sleep to get on the time, I'm going to do that because the show is the most important. You know what I mean? So that's just my philosophy. Sometimes people think it's over the top, but I just want to respect, either the music or the show, whatever. I want to respect that and give it as much as I can. You know what I mean? That's my job, because, when you're calling me and asking me how much it is, I'm telling you how much it is. So if you're willing to do that, then I have to be willing to give you 1,000%. You know what I mean?
How do you look at, in either of those situations, playing to a click track? Is that just a way of life always, or? Well,
that's one of the beauties of having a father that was a producer, because that's what he imparted with me young. because see, before he moved to LA, he was a session guy heavy in New York, and his rhythm section was Richard T, Bernard Purdy, Chuck Rainey, and Eric Gale.
By the way, look those all up because it can't get any better than that.
These guys did sessions it was the old way, like where you're doing, your morning session, then there's a little local place, you go then you do your 3 sessions a day for years, and you got so many incredible records and things out of that, but that was where he was coming from. So he was, and then even being in LA, Gatson, Gat was also somebody that my dad, worked with a lot.
James Gatson, just fill in the names for everybody out
there. Yeah, James Gatson. So these guys, Bernard Purdy, James Gatson, Keltner, these guys this is a different thing. Like people don't, like when you get older and you're just like, you see all this flailing and all this crap, and then you hear these guys just play a groove to a click, it's not the same as everyone else. That's why they are in the regard that they are. It's a different animal. You know what I'm saying? So, I respect that part. I mean, I love chops and everything. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love those guys. That's a whole nother set of people. But for this record thing, there's a handful of people that just have a different type of gift. Gad, we know the names, but a lot of people don't know why. Like some of the younger generation, I can see them perplexed as to why we're so enamored with these people, because they're like, oh, they're just playing a groove. They don't. This new generation, I don't think they even respect groove enough. They don't respect the concept of a groove. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play some chops, and in between I'll play some time, but it's not like the greatest feeling. Their energy is not towards, I want to make everybody just have this feeling and dance and groove. It's just something that takes up space. 8 bars of pocket is just something you do in between soloing over the vocals. It's a different concept now. So I studied those guys, and thankfully, it let me get to the click in a way where the thing that the most drummers have, and they don't know, it's anxiety with the click. It's this fear of, oh my God, what happens if I get off? And thankfully, because of just being around it, and my dad started me early, like, hey, you need to learn how to play to a click, play this track, whatever. It just got me to, okay, I'm more comfortable. So and a lot of times I actually want it, because one other thing that happens is if you're playing with people you don't know and there's no click, then we have to play who's going to be responsible for when it drags or when it pulls or whatever. And, it's a lot less to me. We just have a click. Let's just lock to the click. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to worry about your time. We can all just have a common ground and lock to a click. So I prefer clicks in a lot of such situations, especially recording. Obviously, not jazz. Although I did get asked to do a jazz record once where I had to do an overdub with a rhythm section that was already cut, but overdub the drums playing brushes to a click for like a Rod Stewart Standards album or something. So that's very rare, right? But other than that, click, 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 click. When you want to learn how to play to a click, you can't learn unless you practice like that, And I did a great deal of practicing the records early. So that's good too, because some of those drummers would have been playing to a click, and, so you're kind of getting it second nature. But just having the click on and recording yourself, if you can, is going to give you so much, insight onto, okay, my snare drum's constantly late, or my snare drum's constantly early, or I'm rushing all the fills. It's important that you do this research and this studying, because it's not going to just happen by osmosis. You know what I mean?
Which are all things drummers need to work on, too. We talk about that a lot here on Drum Channel, too. We kind of talk about the importance of learning jazz, not as a genre of music, but jazz being able to put a swing into whatever you're playing. Rock, Latin, it's got to have that feel. And
actually also, aptitude-wise, I mean, once you learn jazz, it's almost like, you speak like all these different languages. So when you're learning jazz first, which is what I did, I didn't come up in the, sometimes I like to look at it like you come up playing rock, or you come up playing church, or you come up playing jazz, as far as real foundational stuff. And also with that goes the required listening for all those genres too, which is an impact on you.
interesting in your career, because I know
Yeah.
these people that you're talking about, a lot of these legendary drummers,
Yeah.
how, they've passed kind of the torch down to you because you've
Right.
got this feeling that you're talking about, which is the reason why people hire them. And that's on Drum Channel, it's always that we talk about how you play, what you play, and why you play it. So it's learning how to play is getting your technique and your chops together, and learning how to use your body to be able to reproduce anything you would hear in your mind.
Yeah.
What to play is what I think you were alluding to with a lot of young drummers who go onto YouTube and they copy these great drummers by copying what they're seeing them do, not what they're hearing them do so much.
Yeah.
And you grew up, as I did, and people of my generation, listening, because there wasn't videos of these drummers. It was the needle on the record back and forth. You were a little past that age, but in my era, it was the needle on the record back and forth, working it back and forth. So, so that's that. What's the secret ingredient? There's the how you play, what you play by copying everybody. Then why do you play it? And how do you make it feel that good? Talking about Jim, our dear friend, where he puts the beat. And isn't it nice in your career now? Because I know at this point, you get hired to do a job sometimes, but most of the time you're getting hired because they want you.
Right.
Absolutely. And they know what they're going to get ahead of time.
Right. And that's the other thing that happens, I think, over time. You just get some sort of identity. And like when you have, like a body of work, that people can look at, you kind of start getting the feel, getting known for your feel. The other issue that I do run into is that a lot of people only know me from the hip hop side because those are some of the biggest names. So they might know that I play drums on Galloway Girl for Ed Sheeran or, other records that are completely
How versatile you are, yeah.
Yeah, super different than anything hip hop, So I run into that sometimes, and that's cool. But, for the most part at this juncture, it is, where, okay, people kind of know what they're getting when they're calling me and, and it kind of helps break the ice and I don't have to, it's like, but I'm not really going to turn much down unless it's something that I completely don't believe I can do. That's the other thing. I don't do music for money. You got to understand that. So that mindset, see, that's a trick because you can accept something because it's a high level thing and then crash and burn your career because you just failed because it wasn't your thing. If you're not a great, strong reader, you can't do a show like we used to do this live radio show called Live From Here with a guy named Chris Steele. Used to be Prairie Home Companion, but we did it. That is the most intense. Like if your musicality is your musicianship's not together, you can't make that because there's basically no rehearsal. It's like the morning of, you run through it. It's going to be live that day at like 5 o'clock. It's no longer on, but it will be live that day at 5 o'clock. And the host is a freak of nature. Chris Steele is like a musical beyond savant, right? So he would write a song every week called the Song of the Week. And I don't ever recall one being in 4, like even in one bar. So it was like, and you'll get the Song of the Week. Sometimes it didn't come to him until the morning. So you don't see it till rehearsal or hear it. And man, it is serious. I mean, we might have, the show, we might be 30, 40 pieces of music, in one day.
So don't audition for the Black Page unless you think you can cover
Come
the Black
on.
Page.
It's like and that's everything all at once. Click, you know what I'm saying? Changing through different sounds. You're trying to modify drums to get the sound, within different, acts that you have to play for. Everything's converging at once. Reading, that's when I switched to iPad. That's what made me switch to iPad because, I was tired of all the charts, so I got the iPad with the pad that you hit and it advances the pages. That was the lifesaver. That's when I switched to that. But, like I said, Don, I mean, it's this is a never-ending journey that we're on. You know what I mean? And it's like, when have you reached the point? It's like, that's subjective. Some people might have a monetary thing, or I have a lifestyle like this, I made it. Some people might say, well, I can take care of my family, I made it. Some people say, oh, I did this gig, I made it. I just feel like it's an ongoing thing. You know what I'm saying? While you're here, it's just an evolving process that happens till you're not here anymore.
Like I said in the introduction, though, I think your career is living it yourself. You probably don't see how amazing it is from somebody looking at it from the outside, but looking at any one of those artists you played with, a drummer would say, "I had the gig with him, and that really, that I had to be at a certain level in order to be prepared for that."
Yeah.
Thinking about the different genres, looking at hip hop or with a Stevie gig, do you go in, this is kind of getting into the drummer geek side of the question thing, do you go in talking about time with a feeling of like, he kind of likes it put here or he kind of likes it up here?
No, I don't do that. I because with Stevie, that's really hard because there's no charts and really no rehearsals. So I never forget the first gig I did with him, I feel like it was like in Africa or something. So it was like, go to his place and play for 20 minutes, and then that's it. You hear somebody say, "Hey, here's the gig. We're gonna fly you out." And so I get there, and then Nate Watts, the bass player, who also was doing the same thing as Jim, the same period, so he did this to me too. So Nate is like, "Yo, here's an iPod," or maybe it was my iPod, and he told me what to download. Like, download this greatest hits, download that, download this album. So there was like 300 songs or whatever. So I was like, "Cool. What's the set list gonna be?" He's like, "It could be any of them."
At any time.
So it was like, thankfully he played, all the popular stuff, but, there were some calls and some gigs where it was like, bro, we never played it. So he just talk you through it and, you just make it happen. You know what I mean? It was crazy. Oh, and not to mention, I have to say this because I just said it in another interview. He stopped me on a song in front of 1 million people. If you go look at Live 8, he stopped me in the beginning of a song because the set list did not have a cue for a DAT playback. So it just had the songs. So one song ended, and I go into I Wish, and he's, stop, because this was the symbol for everything. So this right here was really supposed to be starting the DAT. You know what I'm saying?
That's him giving the signal.
Yeah, and I still didn't know. So I just went, he did like this, and I thought he was like saying go, and it was like, no. And so I got the whack, whack, whack. And they started the DAT, and then we played it, and then we kept going. Like I said, it was, I didn't feel any kind of way. I mean, it's just a mistake. What can you say? I mean, you can't get that back,
But a natural one, that was obviously an easy one to make.
Yeah.
So your relationship with Dre, that really became a big part of your life.
Oh, yeah, that's big, bro. Yeah, I mean... And now see, this is hilarious that you're saying that because it's taking me back to the day I met him. He was going to do a heavy metal group before he left Death Row, but it didn't happen, and then we saw the movie, so it never happened. But for the audition for that, it was at a place that's now the subway station in New York, in North Hollywood, called Leeds. It used to be Leeds. And you go in there, and it was me and a bass player, and then he was just up on the top part, had an MPC 3000, and actually, he was getting his hair cut, and he just turned on the click. That's it. And just said, play. And I just played. You know what I mean? And that was that. After the guy pulled me to the side and said, hey, man, get out of everything you're in. He wants you to be in the group. And I was like, cool. And now I was in a band with a friend of mine that was on the verge of getting signed. And so I was like, it hadn't happened yet, though. And I didn't know how close it was. So I was like, hey, man, I got to do this thing, with Dre. I mean, I love you guys, but I had to do it, And needless to say, the Dre thing never happened. That thing never happened. It was about 93, 94. So then 2 years later, he had left Death Row and he started Aftermath, his company that he formerly has. And he said, hey, man, I'm doing SNL. I want you to do it. So I go do SNL 96 with him. Cool. Now, that's a 2-year gap, right? Then 2 more years go by. 98, hey, I'm doing SNL again. He had put out Chronic 2001. I want you to do it. Okay, cool. I'll do it. So we did that. 1998. Now a 10-year gap. A random sessions, but really a 10-year gap. 2008, he calls me. I go there just to do a session, and he hits me with the, hey, man, what's your schedule? And I was musical director for a friend of mine named Everlast, and I was getting ready to go out with Everlast. We were getting ready to start rehearsal. And I said, well, I'm here for the next 2 weeks. Then I got to go out. And he takes me in his office, and, he, like the movies, he puts the check down, and it's like, no, what's your schedule? I said, oh, I guess I'm here. And then that session turned into me bringing my MIDI gear, setting it up in the live room with me. Unbeknownst to me, the engineers took the outs of it so they could hear what was going on. I'm thinking it's in my headphones, and they heard a track that I was doing, and I saw them gesturing. I'm like, oh, you can hear this? Oh my God. And then they said, come in, and I never left.
Amazing.
That's all, probably 50 releases or something I can't, I probably got 25 songs on Eminem and countless others. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming out. We're nominated this year again, so I got 2 Grammy noms this year, and one is a song that we did with Kanye that's on a guy named DJ Khaled's album, and then another one is for an album my close friend Terrace Martin. I wrote and produced that with him, so a majority of it. So it's just crazy how it's just a weird cycle, Don. It's just like you can never predict what's going to happen.
Yeah, knowing you kind of growing up in your earlier years when you were basically the drummer.
Yeah,
just kind
for
of
sure. When I came over there, that's what it was.
Yeah,
for sure. I had done those SNL things, but I hadn't transitioned into recording with him yet.
Yeah, for the SNL, you were still the drummer in the band.
Yeah, true. And it's just it's crazy. I mean, in between that time, like right after I got with DW, I think is when I did the Snoop tour, and those drums were like at the Hard Rock in Vegas and in India or something. It's just you can never like know what's gonna happen with this stuff, man. It's pretty amazing.
It is. As life goes on, and we're trying to encourage young drummers and to get into playing.
Yeah.
And the idea of becoming a drummer, also expanding your horizons to be able to produce, engineer.
Yeah.
How important is it for young guys, you think, today, in terms of making a career at it?
I tell them all the time now, the younger generation, every time I talk, no matter what the situation is, it's very important that you at least know one of the digital audio workstations, which we call DAWs, so that you can create your own music. I don't care which one, but it's important that you know one. Most people that are really in this business are going to know 2 to 3, right? Most people are going to know Pro Tools and Logic for sure. Some will venture off into Ableton, some like Studio One, but it doesn't matter which one. Learn one, because as a drummer, part of my whole career too is trying to show drummers that you can be songwriters and producers. You don't just have to be the drummer over there. You can be actually part of the music. And that comes from having some knowledge, being able to speak that language, being able to, you know what I mean? It's important. I can't tell you how many times that saved me in certain situations. And also, we want to be able to make our own music, and you might not have a lot of money to just hire everything out. So if you learn it yourself, you can always know, rest assured, you can make a project, and now, easier than ever, put it out for the world. You know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like the technology and all, it's synonymous these days.
Do you do a lot of home studio work where people will send you tracks too?
Or for sure. I was on the early side of that. Oh yeah, for sure. Like many albums. I mean, Melissa Etheridge. I mean, all kind of different things. Probably for the last 15 years. About, you know what I mean.
Wow.
I really was early on that, and then obviously my equipment in the beginning was a certain thing, and as that started rising. Just, you grow into it. And so it's like, I do a lot of that now, you know what I mean? Not in, like right now, not as much as I did like 3-4 years ago, because I've been really mostly producing lately and writing, but a lot, there was a great part of, my kids' childhood where that was, what I was doing. Because, a lot of the studios were closing, the whole business changed. The pandemic even took more of that out. So people that were in that world, at least you had an option. Some people were literally, if you were one of those people that always needed somebody else, man, you were just stuck because there were no tours. A lot of studios where everything was shut down. If you had to just rely on other people, man, you were stuck. That's why so many people went into YouTubing and, just trying to do something and podcasting.
Video editing, everything.
Yeah, and I feel that. I mean, you have to do whatever you have to do, but I'm a person that, because like I said, it's an example. My father had a studio. We had it at our house. Then we had a commercial facility. I've seen the thing of, I don't want to always have to go for everything. I want to be able to control certain things, myself. So that carried on with me. My daughter, she has a studio, and she's made music already. Like I said, that's TV and film. So, it's a thing of that knowledge. It's super important. And I have to say my favorite quote that I always say, which is, "It is not the fills that pay the bills."
There you go. Well, that's a direct quote from Trevor Lawrence Jr. That'll be the highlight of our buzzwords here. That's
sir. So
looking at it from the other direction for a second, I know you've spoken about this as you being the drummer, but as a producer, you're hiring drummers from time to time.
Sure. Oh yeah.
So when you're looking at like young drummers coming up, and for you young drummers out there as you're building your career, we know what the answer is because it was effective in your life. But what are the main things you want to see in a drummer? Why would you call one drummer over another drummer? Because you know his time feel, or you've worked with him before, or?
Well, yeah. So when it comes to making records, I mean, the last thing is chops and feel. Like that's irrelevant. For me, it's the grasp of sound, like grasping. Okay, do you even really know what snare drum is? What do you know why people go so crazy over certain older drums? Do you know what the characteristic of a Black Beauty tuned low with it's like some people don't know that. You know what I mean? And this generation, it's like, where are they gonna find it unless they're really looking for it? So, the kids that are at least interested, because the people hit me all the time and they're very, interested and they want to learn. So I understand that, and it's promising, you know what I mean? But there are a lot of people that don't care, and that's the thing that bothers me, because they don't see the relevance of that part. And if you keep doing that, it's just going to go away. It's an art, it's a science, and it's something that needs to continue, because no matter what with the technology, right? We know the technology is incredible. I mean, you definitely know that. It's an amazing place right now. But the physics are always going to be what they are when you have a live instrument displacing air with a microphone in front of it. That's physics. That's never going to go away, right? We figured that out years ago. It's never going away. So I feel like, if we're going to play this instrument and say, you want to have a career at it, why not really truly study it and study what makes it tick, right? Let's not just stay on the surface. Let's go deep and find out, so-and-so record is incredible. What made it incredible? What made When the Levee Breaks such an important thing? It's that mic at the top of the stairs. It's that slapback that we got. You know what I mean? It's like, but some people don't. Some people think it's some kind of computer. They just don't know. And once again, in my opinion, it's ego that stops you from wanting to dig deeper. See, ego's like integrity. It only matters when nobody's in the room. You see what I'm saying? So you might not even know that it's ego prohibiting you from getting to these different places. You understand what I'm saying? So I don't look at it like these are just, ego driven, whatever. They might just, some people might call it lazy or no work ethic, but realistically, at some point you've made the decision, I don't need to know that. It'll be cool. Oh, they're only paying me this, so it'll be fine. You can't, that's not the attitude of longevity and a career. That's the attitude of a gigger that's always going to be dependent on someone else. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's a lot of it's mindset, you know what I mean? And keeping yourself, in a place that you don't let the money change your level of service. You know what I'm saying? Right? So it's like if I agree to something, then I'm going to give you my thing. Right? And that's my thing. And it might be a gig around town, and you might see me with 5 snare drums because I don't know what the room's like. You know what I'm saying? That's just me. And I didn't ask you to carry it. I'm going to deal with it, right? Or it might be a place that has a perfectly fine house kit. Nope. I'm going to bring my DWs like, I played the other night I don't do many gigs in LA, but we had a real great experience a couple nights ago at a friend of mine's club called Verse, right next to Larrabee Studios. He owns Larrabee. He's the biggest mixer in music, named Manny Mariquin. So he's also went to our same high school that we all went to. And so Manny has Verse, which is hands down, probably the best food in Los Angeles and the best room. So the room is engineered in a way, first of all, it's completely, you capture everything. There's an SSL like right on the other wall by the kitchen, and it's wired to the big studio. And it's engineered to where all the spoons and forks are canceled out. So you can't even hear spoons and forks clinking in the restaurant because they're canceling out.
That's out there.
It's out. So I'm watching people post videos from the audience, and it sounds like a freaking record. You know, I'm like, dude, this is incredible that somebody's phone and his drums, and it sounds this great in the room. So I played there the other night. Now, I don't know if you remember because we did the comparison. Remember that? We did when you did Pure Oak and all that?
Yeah,
so that's
sure.
Manny.
Yeah.
So obviously he had some DWs there, and I think those are the ones I actually had him bring out. So I knew what was there, so I knew what to expect. You know what I'm saying? But if it's a place I don't know what to expect, I'm going to just err on the side of I don't want to be in the wrong place musically because of being lazy. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to turn it back on you. See, the common thing with this generation is, oh, you don't have sticks? Oh, man, you know. Oh, you don't have any other heads? Oh, man, I'm just playing what y'all have. I'm just not into that, man.
No.
You know, with endorsements. That's the other funny thing. Endorsements and you're still running around not carrying anything? Come on, man. That's not it.
I think what I'm hearing you say is when you show up to the gig, you got to show up with your technique, with your mind, with your knowledge, with your drum set, and with your ears.
Your ears, everything. Everything you need to bring the music the highest level of respect, because we're all there for the music. Quincy Jones said, biggest ego in the room can only be the music. So my thing is, I'm just there contributing. I'm trying to bring my experience the best I can to help your thing, enhance it. Maybe you didn't know this snare drum would make this record sound like this. Well, now you know. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of where it is. People say, Trevor, you're a drum hoarder. You got a problem. I said, well, at one point I had stuff in L.A., New York, and
Collector,
Miami.
say collector, not hoarder.
Yeah, exactly. I said, at one time stuff was spread out so it didn't seem as concentrated. And even now I have stuff in L.A. and Nashville. But it's like, there's reasons. Everything there's a reason. It was always a reason. It was never just for whatever. It's always because, oh, wait a second, I might need this for that. And Drake, we might have to recreate a record. You never know. We might have to recreate some old loop. Got to just be able to dial it in, and it happens a lot. So
something was interesting in our long years that we've known Jim Keltner, that he had brought up to me many years ago, which I'm sure you learned too. The way a snare drum sounds when you'd play it live and the way it might sound in the studio, there's some snare drums that I know he has that would sound horrible live, which he would admit to. But I have actually suggested when I've heard some of them, let me fix this. He said, no. It has a dent in the side because he dropped it, but that's the brass snare drum. It sounds exactly, it's just what the microphone wants to hear.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is like the pro side of the good thing about once you start amassing a collection of drums is they can start being specialized. So then you start having a drum that's the sound with that snare drum and it stays that sound. You know what I mean? Like you got a 1940s whatever, it stays there. Oh, by the way, I played my Carbon the other night, ungodly. And that was the same thing because they had a plexiglass for me, right? So I was like, oh, when I was sounding, sounds interesting. And when the music played, that thing was killing. It was like, dude, it was weird because it was like, yeah, it sounds cool in here, but maybe this ain't the one for this room. But when we started playing, immaculate, the Carbon Edge.
Sure,
the nice. Space one. Oh, yeah. What a phenomenal drum. But once again, I imagine I could play whatever, was just there and just leave it whatever. But it's all about, what's going to be something that's special, what stands out. You know what I mean? What makes this music take another turn, and it's you're still geeking out. We're still like, the passion is there. That shows that you have passion about
I feel like
something.
I'm talking to the 17-year-old Trevor.
Come on, man. And that hasn't changed. I drum hang, drum geek. I do that all the time. The thing that changes, you just don't have as much time to do it. But I'm all in. I could go to DW every day and hang. I'm all in, man.
And I'm as excited to interview you now as I was 30 years ago.
I'm just saying.
And it goes on and on.
You definitely haven't changed your zeal for it, and that's another thing. When you start seeing, certain things as you get older, you start realizing why certain things are like that, and you have, just, DW has changed the whole world of drums, and it's like, that's because you guys at the helm have the passion. You know what I'm saying? So 50
I think
years.
the drummer's mentality of all those years in clubs too, and that's what I've, and what we want to bring to Drum Channel now is just that, how do we educate the young kids? How do we first? This occurred to me only a few years ago. I don't think I've ever spoken about it, but I realized as opposed to showing them all the great information and all the great teachers, you have to understand that you need to learn.
Yeah.
The first thing is you need to private instruction is absolutely great.
Yeah.
I mean, a big part of your life.
Sure,
too.
it was for
if
sure.
If you're not at a place where you can do that, online, of course, is the next best thing. The combination is the ultimate kind of both.
Yeah, because I'm going to take, you do a lesson. When you're looking online, obviously it's one way, right? But then when you're in person, it's like, yeah, you're not doing this right, but this is why. It's just, you're right. Those are best of both worlds, because obviously we didn't have online. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We used to have to get Zildjian Day in New York VHS, and that was the thing for 30 years. Or this, Contemporary Drummer +1. This was groundbreaking. That was a game changer for practice and for all kind of stuff. So. And probably for splashes too.
And what you said earlier, that's true. What you said, we're dating Dave, but that's okay.
Yeah.
What you said earlier is true too. I think it's when you listen to these classic drummers, understanding not just to copy the beat that they played, but why did they play it at that part of the song?
Yeah.
Why does it feel so good? We know as drummers, we're the leaders of the band, right?
Right,
you are the leader. We don't, don't tell the other people that when you're out there necessarily, but that's not an ego statement. It's just because you can have the most effective anybody in a situation like that.
Yeah.
To wind up here, I think we have to go back through your career. At one point, I think you were ahead of your time, and maybe the time will be coming again for a little beats and eats.
Oh, man. So, you know what, Don? You're so funny because
people don't know what I'm talking about.
I'll say, so I went to cooking school early on. That was like one of my hobbies, right? So my hobbies are cooking and Second Amendment firearm stuff. I'm a huge firearm guy, instructor, chief range safety officer, the whole nine.
Great.
So that's, later in life hobby, but originally it was cooking. So in the first 10 years of my marriage, I was the one that cooked. So a friend of mine, this is when, video and stream, it was still very early, right? I don't think streaming had even started yet, but YouTube was coming on the scene. And so a friend of mine and I had a concept of trying to mix, hip hop music and hip hop or whatever with food. So we did a concept called Beats and Eats. So we did a full pilot. My first guest was Cedric the Entertainer.
I remember.
And and it was a whole thing. And what happened was there was another guy that was like a real big chef at restaurants and all that. And he literally, obviously he didn't call it that, but he basically stole my show and even took my co-host, Joe Torre, with him. You know what I'm saying? So I look up and see, what the heck? This is our same show. Before we got the show sold, obviously. So, we kind of put it on the back burner. But now, as things are changing and, at this back end of my career type vibe, maybe not the back end, but
no, you're not even close to that.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to really
go
crazy over here in this other genre that I'm looking forward to. But it's going to probably make sense. So we have a cigar night that we go to. So we've literally been discussing it at the cigar night about, trying to maybe film some more, because obviously now you can film so much easier.
I didn't know anything about it. I thought I was really true. You were ahead of your time. Right?
It was a thing. Listen, at that time, it wasn't connected like that, and we had managed to get a good guest. The pilot looks pretty good even still,
You could do. So, there's a lot of drummer friends we have who are chefs.
Sure.
Kurt Pescara, they all have their favorite recipes. And
so we're gonna, I'm gonna figure out how to do a twist on it so it becomes a little bit more, just unique, but I think we're going to revisit that at some point, because I'm about to be cooking again all for Thanksgiving, this year.
Maybe we could tie it into a drum. We could have a drum contest and a cooking contest at the same time.
Oh yeah, I mean, come on, I'm down with that. I mean, I love, because and to be honest, there is a connection. There is a connection because it's a creative thing. It's a creative thing once you learn technique, but then you feel free to be creative. And it's definitely a release, even in what we call mise en place, which is getting everything together. Even when you're just preparing everything, there is a thing. And I have to tell you, there's also that same release when you're at the range. I know it sounds crazy. One of the things that enamored me is so relaxing. I don't know why. I'm still trying to figure out, is it the smell of gunpowder? Is it the just the actual vibration? I don't know what it is, but when I go to the range in the middle of the week or whatever, when I have some time, it's so relaxing, man. So those two things do have that in common, and maybe one day I'll be able to figure out what is that thing that's making that release happen in both of those extremely different situations, but there is one very similar to what happens when you're on the bandstand and the thing becomes that moment when everybody's on the same page. I mean, with Herbie, I did Herbie for almost 10 years, like from 2010 to about 2019, before my boy Justin started doing it, who's murdering that gig, by the way, Justin Tyson. And in between legs, once we came back, it would still take a few weeks for us to get back to that place that we left off. You know what I mean? And that's with the exact same guys, but we take 2 weeks off, a month off. About the second week, it starts getting crazy, and then it starts going to that place. You know what I mean? So, there's a certain similarity in a release that you get when the groove is right, when we're cooking and when you're shooting. I know it's odd, but it's just the truth.
I think it's very, very true.
Yeah.
And I think Miles Davis had it right. One of his most popular albums was Cookin'.
Yeah, come on.
And I don't know any drummer that cooks more behind the drum set than
Right.
they do in the kitchen,
Yeah.
and in every other area of his life. Just coming out here and walking in, we all felt, excited and happy that you were in the room. And
it's a vibe, man. I mean, I believe that you don't have to just have this aura about yourself and try to be always serious and never smile. Forget all that. But also, my concept is that everybody's on the level. You know what I'm saying? So I don't believe in, just because somebody did that, you know what I mean? And maybe I'm different, because I get to be around people on a regular basis. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're at Dre's. I can't tell, so anybody can show up. You know what I'm saying? And, that's just, that it's kind of like a normal thing. But even regardless of, and that's where you even reinforce that everybody's just the same. Like in that level of people, nobody's outdoing the other person. It's like, no, we're all successful. We're just here focused on the music. You know what I mean? So I believe in that. I believe everybody's on the level, and I just want to make everybody happy and work with people and just have a fun, productive time. There's no need for any weird energy. You know what I'm saying?
No, and I can tell you your success is so well deserved, as I've
I
seen
appreciate
it,
that,
as
Don.
I've seen
Thank
it,
you.
seen
Thank
it
you
through
very
the
much.
years. And I
Thank you.
can't thank you enough for taking time out of this incredibly busy life that you have
cool,
to come
man.
up and join us here.
Anytime.
This can be your second home, where we're planning a lot of other things while we're here
I love
today.
this place. This is an amazing facility. So
We'll
I'm always down.
We'll
to
be
come.
hitting it. Trev, thank you again. Thank you again very much.
Thank you so much.